The American Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was a pivotal conflict in United States history. It tore the nation apart, pitting the northern states, known as the Union, against the southern states, known as the Confederacy. The Union fought to preserve the nation and end slavery, while the Confederacy fought for their right to govern themselves and maintain their way of life. Differences in economic interests and social values between the North and South had been growing for decades. The industrial North was moving towards a free labor system, while the agrarian South relied heavily on slavery. As the war began, both sides were confident of a quick victory. However, the conflict quickly escalated into one of the bloodiest wars in American history. Understanding the causes, key events, and lasting impacts of this conflict is crucial to understanding American history and its ongoing journey towards equality and justice. Slavery was the most critical cause of the American Civil War. The Southern economy depended on it, with millions of enslaved African Americans working on plantations. The North, however, was moving towards industrialization and had largely abolished slavery. This fundamental difference created deep-seated animosity between the two regions. States' rights were another significant cause. The South believed in the sovereignty of states to govern themselves without federal interference. They argued that each state had the right to decide whether to permit slavery. The North, on the other hand, believed in a stronger central government that could make decisions for the entire nation. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final straw for the Southern states. Lincoln was seen as a threat to slavery, despite his initial stance of containing it rather than abolishing it. His election led to the secession of 11 Southern states, which formed the Confederate States of America. The Civil War officially began on April 12, 1861, with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in South Carolina. This federal fort was a symbol of Union authority in the seceded states. When Union soldiers refused to surrender, Confederate forces bombarded the fort, forcing its surrender after 34 hours. The First Battle of Bull Run, also known as the Battle of Manassas, took place on July 21, 1861. It was the first major land battle and ended in a Confederate victory, shattering the North's hope for a swift end to the war. The Battle of Shiloh in April 1862 was another significant early engagement. Fought in Tennessee, it resulted in a high number of casualties and demonstrated the war's deadly nature. Despite initial Confederate successes, Union forces managed to secure a strategic victory. These early engagements were crucial in shaping the strategies and outcomes of the subsequent battles. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1 to July 3, 1863, was one of the most significant battles of the Civil War. It took place in Pennsylvania and marked the furthest advance of Confederate forces into the North. General Robert E. Lee led the Confederate Army, while General George Meade commanded the Union forces. Gettysburg was a brutal and intense conflict, with over 160,000 soldiers engaged in combat. The Union forces managed to hold their ground against repeated Confederate assaults. The most famous of these attacks was Pickett's Charge, a failed attempt by the Confederates to break through the Union lines. The Union victory at Gettysburg had significant strategic and psychological impacts. It halted the Confederate invasion of the North and boosted Northern morale. The battle also inflicted severe losses on the Confederate Army, from which they would never fully recover. Gettysburg is remembered as a crucial turning point in the Civil War. On January 1, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, a landmark document in American history. This executive order declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were to be set free. Although it did not immediately free all enslaved individuals, it was a significant step towards the abolition of slavery and altered the course of the Civil War. The Emancipation Proclamation shifted the war's focus from solely preserving the Union to also include the abolition of slavery. It weakened the Confederacy by encouraging enslaved people to escape and join the Union forces, thereby depleting the South's labor force. Approximately 180,000 African Americans served in the Union forces by the end of the war, playing a crucial role in the Union's eventual victory. The Emancipation Proclamation is celebrated as a bold and transformative act, It laid the groundwork for the 13th Amendment, which would officially abolish slavery in the United States. The American Civil War drew to a close in the spring of 1865. After a series of relentless battles and sieges, the Confederate forces were exhausted and outnumbered. General Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate Army, realized that further resistance was futile. On April 9, 1865, he met with Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia to discuss terms of surrender. General Grant offered generous terms to Lee and his men. The Confederate soldiers were allowed to return home with their personal possessions, horses, and were provided food rations. This gesture of leniency was intended to promote reconciliation and healing between the North and South. Lee accepted the terms, effectively ending the Civil War. The surrender at Appomattox marked the conclusion of 4 years of intense and bloody conflict. It signified the collapse of the Confederacy and the preservation of the United States as a unified nation. The aftermath of the Civil War was a time of immense challenge and change. The war had taken a staggering toll on the nation, with over 600,000 soldiers dead and countless others wounded. The southern states were left devastated, with their infrastructure in ruins and their economy in shambles. The task of rebuilding the South and integrating millions of newly freed African Americans into society was daunting. Reconstruction began as an effort to address these challenges. The federal government implemented policies to rebuild the South and ensure the civil rights of the freedmen. The Freedmen's Bureau was established to provide assistance, including food, education, and legal support, to formerly enslaved individuals. The passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the 14th Amendment were significant milestones during Reconstruction. These measures aimed to secure equal rights for African Americans and ensure their protection under the law. Despite these advancements, the period was also marred by violence and discrimination. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan emerged, seeking to undermine Reconstruction efforts and maintain white supremacy. The Civil War and its aftermath brought about significant legislative changes that reshaped American society. One of the most important was the 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, which officially abolished slavery throughout the United States. Following the 13th Amendment, the 14th and 15th Amendments were also passed during the Reconstruction era. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including formerly enslaved individuals, and provided equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, aimed to secure voting rights for African American men by prohibiting voter discrimination based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. These legislative changes had a profound social impact, laying the foundation for future civil rights movements. They represented a significant shift in the legal and social status of African Americans, providing them with new rights and opportunities. Despite the challenges and resistance faced, these amendments set important precedents and laid the groundwork for the continued struggle for civil rights and social justice in the United States. The American Civil War left a lasting legacy that continues to shape the United States. One of the most significant outcomes was the end of slavery. It paved the way for the civil rights movements of the 20th century. The Union's victory affirmed the supremacy of federal authority over states' rights. The legacy of the Civil War is also evident in the ongoing struggle for racial equality. The fight for civil rights continued into the 20th century. Reflecting on the American Civil War, we remember the immense sacrifices made. The war claimed hundreds of thousands of lives and left many scarred. Soldiers displayed extraordinary courage and resilience. Their sacrifices were made for deeply held beliefs. The lessons learned are significant. The Union's fight to end slavery exemplified moral conviction. The Civil War's legacy is a tapestry of sacrifice and progress.